the common sense housing documentary I put forward so that he can see a common sense plan to cut bureaucracy and build homes.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is shameful that the Conservative leader is exploiting the very real anxieties and fears of Canadians for clicks and views. This leader continues to demean co-ops as Soviet-style housing. He called a Niagara family's home a shack, and he keeps using homeless people as props. A responsible leader acts on the concerns of Canadians instead of exploiting them for political gain just so he can get his 15 minutes.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
What is shameful is that this Prime Minister is causing homelessness in this country. He's caused a doubling of the number of people eating at a food bank in Toronto. One single mother in Sydney said, well, this month I had to choose between eating and having heat. My kids are getting fed, but my house is freezing, end quote. The Prime Minister's solution is to quadruple the carbon tax on that single mother and on seniors. Mr. Speaker, we have a common sense Conservative bill to take the carbon tax off farmers and food. Why did the Prime Minister manipulate and intimidate Liberal senators into blocking that bill? Why does he want to tax food right before Christmas?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, after all the intimidation and threats from the Conservatives towards parliamentarians on 234, it turns out the only farming the Conservative Party cares about is rage farming. Because all of this was just an attempt to fundraise off of the backs of farmers. Time and time again, the Conservative leader has shown that he wants to take Canadians back to the Stone Age instead of helping them get ahead. On this side of the House, the Liberal government will always be there to support farmers.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, as this Prime Minister raises taxes on food, brings back malnutrition, brings in record-smashing food bank use, the best he can come up with is a bunch of scripted talking points from junior staffers in the PMO. That is outrageous. Canadians are going hungry as Christmas is just around the corner. And a common sense Conservative bill to take the tax off farmers and food could have helped solve the problem. Why did he manipulate and intimidate senators to keep the tax on the food and make our people go hungry right before Christmas?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we have an opposition leader who is so ideologically opposed to protecting the planet that he's willing to take Parliament hostage and stop Parliament from supporting workers, stop Parliament from supporting families, and stop Parliament from supporting Ukraine as well. The leader of the opposition has threatened to ruin the holidays if his ideological demands are not met. Let us be clear, we will keep working for Canadians while the Conservative leader is only fueled by the sound of his own voice and has no real plan for this country. We will never back down from supporting Canadians.
This is a great plan Polyev has, and apologies for being a little late today. We had some technical problems with the internet here. We're back, and this is a very exciting exchange here this morning. And thank God there's some spine in the Conservative Party.
Mr. Speaker.
Anyway, so I'll, while the blockhead is talking here, I just want to make a few comments. The Conservative Party is fighting back hard because the Senate did not pass Bill C-234. It failed by one vote because that member who should have been voting for it was at the COP28 climate change conference in Dubai, being wined and dined and virtue signaling all day. So this is good. I'm glad to see Polyev demonstrate some guts and some spine on behalf of farmers, and to say, to hell with you, Justin Trudeau. You're not going to get away with this. You want your little game to be played? We'll play the game with you. You want to pretend you didn't antagonize You didn't intimidate. You didn't threaten senators to vote your way. BS. We don't believe it. Yeah. Because, yeah, you're not worth the cost, and none of these MPs are worth the cost if they don't do something and just they want to just go home and say, "Oh, too bad. Put our hands in the air. Didn't work. Too bad for the farmers." Well, I'm glad to see they're actually going to earn their salaries because they get a lot of time off. So if they have to have a few days around Christmas here, if the Christmas holidays aren't quite as long, I mean, good God, they get 6 weeks as it is. It's ridiculous. The U.S. Congress is never off this long. And and you can hear Trudeau belly aching. "Oh, he's ruining my holidays. He's ruining my Christmas vacation." Why is he going to go to some private island again? Is that what Trudeau's up to? Well, I'm really glad to see this, and I'm sure the viewers today are happy to see that Polyev is fighting back on this. I'm going to do a stand on guard episode dedicated to this whole thing, and the fact that this speaker who again showed partisanship when he's in Washington. He was talking about how wonderful it was to be the leader of the young liberals and how he was so encouraged by Klaus Schwab. Klaus Goldfinger Schwab of the World Economic Forum. He told our Mr. Speaker in his earlier days that he was going to win. And Andrew Scheer, of course, who was a former speaker and who was nonpartisan during those days, he did his damnedest to stand in the middle, to not be partisan. He's calling out this Greg Fergus, this atrocity of a speaker, to say, "You're not nonpartisan, not even trying." Anyway, back to this for a while. Who are we here? No, it's the NDP.
When they need them the most. When will the Prime Minister reverse his $150 million cut to women's shelters?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, today and every day, we reinforce that everyone has the right to live free from violence. We've made historic investments, including unprecedented investments during the pandemic to support shelters, and we're taking real action to end gender-based violence in our communities. We're also working with provinces and territories to develop a national action plan to prevent gender-based violence and support survivors. We know there is an urgent need for more action, and we will not stop until gender-based violence comes to an end.
The Honourable Member for Nunavut.
Indigenous women and their children are forced to live in violent situations because of the lack of adequate housing. The Liberals are actively keeping Indigenous peoples marginalized by delaying the release of housing investments promised. The NDP fought to secure $4 billion to help build homes Indigenous peoples need. But the Liberals keep delaying these investments, keeping Indigenous peoples out in the cold. When will this government help Indigenous communities get the homes they so desperately need?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are taking action to address housing gaps.
You can see how upset Trudeau is at the very thought that his Christmas vacation might be just a little bit delayed or upset or interfered with by the Parliament, by actually having to attend. And yeah, he wanted his goddamn carbon tax to apply to farmers because he doesn't give a damn about agriculture. He doesn't care what the price of food is. He doesn't care if you're going to starve. He doesn't care what you're going to have to pay for groceries. Not an issue with Justin Trudeau. Doesn't care. It's just about the ideology of fighting climate change, even though his carbon tax is useless. And he, in the broad light of day, he would probably admit that, as much of a liar as he is. Well, let's listen.
Pleading with them, farmers. Our common sense plan will take the tax off of the people who grow the food, ship the food, and as a result, Canadians who buy the food. Yesterday, he got his Christmas wish. Liberal senators gutted Bill C-234, a move that will keep food prices high while Canadians visit food banks in record numbers. So will he finally listen to the outcry? Will he listen to anyone but his globetrotting activist environment minister and take the tax off so people can put food on their table this Christmas?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House. Well, we'll try it. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The only senators that sit in any caucus are Conservative senators, Mr. Speaker. And I would note that up to 1/3 of those Conservative senators did not vote yesterday. Mr. Speaker, climate change is driving food inflation, not pollution pricing. Farmers are on the front lines of climate change. They know about climate change. They experience the effects of droughts, flood, and storms firsthand. And unlike the Conservative Party, they have no problem saying climate change. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative strategy is to ignore climate change and stay hiding in the pockets of big oil and gas. That is no strategy at all, and it is risky and reckless.
The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, every single senator who voted against this bill was a Liberal senator. The Prime Minister's carbon tax has already ruined Christmas for millions of Canadian families. So Conservatives are going to ruin Christmas vacation for this Prime Minister and his Liberal MPs. We will stay here as long as it takes to force them to axe the tax so the Canadians can afford gas, groceries, and home heating. So, Mr. Speaker, how long are we going to be here? Is it 1 week? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 3 weeks until this Prime Minister finally relents and cancels his carbon tax on farmers, on families, and on First Nations?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the Conservatives who had their senators bully independent senators in the other place, we will stand up to the bullies on the other side. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to stand for Canadians every single day. And we know that when we put a price on pollution with the rebate, Canadians get more back than they pay. If the Conservatives cared about Canadians and their affordability challenges, they would support the price on pollution because it is
bullying the senators, calling them up and telling them to kill Bill C-234, a common sense bill to help farmers and families. And the Senate, you know, they listened to him. They gutted the bill, okay? But people are suffering. People are hungry. The food bank use in my riding is up over 100%. So will the Prime Minister finally listen to Canadians and take the carbon tax off farmers, First Nations, and families?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The other place actually found one of the Conservative senators in breach of privilege for the actions that he took bullying independent senators, Mr. Speaker. That member should be cognizant of the fact that independent senators can make their own decisions. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to supporting Canadians, this government has been there the entire time, whether it was through supporting millions of Canadians through the pandemic, whether it's supporting them through the social safety net that the Conservatives are looking to gut with their cuts. Mr. Speaker, in typical Conservative fashion, they're looking to take.
Now, this woman is again lying. She's lying about it's carbon is not pollution. You're not getting more back in your pockets.
To make everybody poor. But you know, the Prime Minister
and they are making everybody poor.
Christmas for Canadians. And so Conservatives will ruin his vacation. We will stay here and we will fight until he decides to take the carbon tax off families, farmers, and First Nations. Will he do it?
I'm glad to see MPs finally doing their job.
House Leader.
Because usually they were in cahoots together on this.
Look, Mr. Speaker, party opposite continues to spread information that is simply incorrect. When they're talking about the vote in the other place, they should really be asking the
other place
senators who sit in that caucus why they didn't show up to vote yesterday. Mr. Speaker, if they truly cared about it, that would have been the question that they were asking instead of posing this to the government that has nothing to do with the independent Senate. But what we do on this side of the House is we support farmers. We're going to be there for farmers. We're going to be there for all Canadians like we have been since 2015. We're going to keep delivering for them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let's just all take a deep breath.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, everything cost more, and unfortunately, it's not over yet. We know that the bill adopted C234, and even the Greens voted with us, but then it would have given us some tax breaks for farmers. But then the Prime Minister picked up the phone and personally called senators to make sure that Bill C234 would be gutted, and then, unfortunately, it worked, and that's the problem. Why is the Prime Minister always so intent on taking even more money out of families' pockets in Canada? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, I have enormous respect for my colleague, but he knows that the only party that is in this House that is trying to take money from Canadians is the Conservatives.
What a lying
Cancelling the price on
witch.
pollution will leave most Canadians worse off than they are now. And if they have questions for senators, why
Does this
did the
woman have
Conservative
an
senators not vote
idea
yesterday? On this side of the
back
House,
to
we
his head?
respect
She's
democratic
just an
institutions,
incredibly
but we know that's not the case for the
stupid
Conservatives. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent.
They
I also have
liberals are
great
stealing
deal of
money
respect
from
for
your
the minister,
wallet.
but I'd like her to
They've
explain
got their
that how
hand in
come
your pocket.
they want to seek even more money from the pockets of Canadians. And that's exactly what they're doing. But we
exactly
have
what
the
I
solution
said.
with Bill C234, which gives Canadian farmers a break. It means that food will not continue to rise like it has under this Liberal government. And once again, the Liberals will rely on their senators to attack this bill. When will this government and people understand that it costs a lot to vote for this Liberal government? The Honourable Government House Leader. It costs expense a lot. That's what the Conservatives would do. They would take money from the pockets of Canadians. They voted against an increase in the CCB and an increase in OIS for seniors. They voted against dental benefits for lower income Canadians. On this side of the House, we understand that we have to be there to support Canadians. And that's something that I would like the Conservative Party understand as well. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, the number to retain this week is 2,000. 2,000 is the number of meetings the Liberals have held with fossil fuel lobbyists since last year. 2,000 meetings in 2 years with oil companies. We know that numbers don't lie. And when a Liberal gives you a choice between listening to what he's saying and looking at the numbers, do like me and choose the numbers. Look at the numbers. The Liberals tell us day after day that they agree, but I have a simple question for them. Do they realize that the numbers suggest that they're leaning towards black oil? The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's important to have meetings with all stakeholders in the economy. Yes, it includes the oil sector, but also environmentalist groups. 2 weeks ago, I had a meeting with environmental defense, with many green groups, to have conversations that are very important. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Figures don't lie, Mr. Speaker. 2,000 meetings between the Liberals and fossil fuel lobbyists since last year. The PMO has met with oil companies twice as often as with environmental groups. And on the finance side, it's even four times more often. Does this have an impact on policies? Well, let's follow the money trail. The Liberals' flagship environmental measure in Bill C-59 is $30.3 billion in oil company subsidies. When will the Liberals base their policies on the climate crisis rather than the oil companies whining? The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've already said, it's important for us to hold meetings with participants of all sectors of our economy. And of course, I had many meetings with the Bloc as well. But I'd like to say that we did announce this week new regulations to reduce methane by 75%. And it's the first country worldwide that has made this commitment. It's something that's very important to fight climate change, and we are very proud of this.
The honourable member for Grand Prairie Mackenzie.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister spent the weekend pressuring Liberal senators, demanding that they kill our Conservative bill that would axe the carbon tax for Canadian farmers. Yesterday, those senators bowed to their political master. They used every dirty trick in the book to gut the bill. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, these Liberals aren't hurting us. They're hurting hungry Canadians who can't afford these higher prices for their food. Why won't the Prime Minister park his ideological admiration for higher taxes for Canadians and give Canadians a Christmas miracle and finally axe the tax for farmers, First Nations, and families?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, there's no Liberal senators, and the Conservative senators didn't even vote.
Joke.
Mr. Speaker, we already know the Conservatives don't believe in
You're
climate
a
change, but
joke.
it seems
You're
like
a
they
clown.
don't believe in math either. University of Calgary-based economists conducted a thorough review of our price on pollution, and facts are facts, Mr. Speaker. 94% of families who earn less than $50,000 receive more back through our price on pollution than they pay. But in typical Conservative fashion, Mr. Speaker, the member from Carleton and his merry band of climate change deniers want to steal from the poor and give to the rich. It's risky and reckless, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Grand Prairie Mackenzie.
Well, Mr.
Bunch
Speaker,
of
that's the
hypocrites.
most ridiculous answer I've heard in this House today. There's only one
Good.
group in
Give
this
it
House
to
that's
them.
trying to take away from
Give it
those
to them.
that are most vulnerable. When will these Liberals finally understand that if you tax the Liberals, you tax the farmers that grow the food and the truckers that ship the food, it's eventually going to cost more for Canadians to buy the food. When will he set aside his ideological attachment to the carbon tax and finally give a break to farmers, First Nations, and Canadian families this Christmas?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of
They'll,
Environment.
they'll tell you the lie again that there's more in your pockets.
They are the first to feel the effects of floods and droughts. And Mr. Speaker,
What about it? What does that have to do with
yields are
climate
down
change?
20%
Prove some
in 2023.
causation.
Why is that,
You
Mr.
know
Speaker?
there's no
It's
causation.
climate change. Yet, unlike these Conservatives, farmers have no problem identifying climate change as the culprit for the reduction in their yields, Mr.
Liar.
Speaker. Speaking of wheat, if the
Liar.
Conservatives really want to support food security, then they should support the breadbasket of Europe, Mr. Speaker. That's Ukraine.
Oh,
Ukraine
get
says
off
they
with
need
your Ukraine is
assistance in strengthening
finished.
economic
The war is
resilience.
over, you
They
bloody
voted against
halfwit.
the Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement.
What a
I
bloody
urge them to
idiot. The
reconsider that
war in
shameful vote
Ukraine
third
is
reading.
over. We're not getting our break from Ukraine, you stupid idiot. I am
Mr.
just
Speaker,
so
yesterday,
sick of
Liberal
these
appointed
idiots.
senators voted to gut common sense Conservative Bill C-234, an action that betrays farmers. For the last decade, this PM has repeatedly made the claim that the Senate and those he appoints to it are independent. Yet this weekend proved otherwise. He and his socialist environment minister were busy employing a campaign of bullying and pressure to force his senators to kill this needed carbon tax carve-out. The carbon tax is punishing the farmers who produce the food and the folks that need it. Will this Prime Minister finally just listen to Canadians and axe his carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, I think my honourable colleague is well aware the other place
Oh,
makes
no.
a decision on their own. We do not. The Conservative Party of Canada has senators in their caucus. The Conservative Party of Canada does not have a policy or a plan for the environment. But I can assure my honourable colleague.
Are you the Minister of Agriculture or the Minister of the Environment? Point two. This guy is a joke. He's obviously senile. He can't think for himself. He has to read a script every day.
We have and will continue to support our farmers and ranchers in this country.
I just want to say, I mean, as I said, the Honourable Minister sits right here. I can barely hear him. So let's try to keep the sound down a little.
You're not missing anything.
Battle River Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, I know for a fact that farmers are asking that minister to axe the carbon tax. That PM promised that the Senate would be independent, but the actions this past week proved that that is a complete farce. We know he bullied his senators. The PM himself was on the phone over the weekend telling them they had to gut Bill C-234. The Prime Minister lied,
Trudeau's
and his
lying
minions
about it.
continue
Trudeau
to
is lying about it. It is just absolutely shocking to see these liberal liars read the script that Klaus Schwab has written for them. Ah! Where do they find this guy? What? It's good to see a little bit of excitement in this goddamn chamber. Because democracy's become a joke under Trudeau. So it's nice to see some reckless behavior in the House of Commons.
I'm asking the honourable member to apologize for the second time and retract that word. The honourable member knows full well you cannot use that word in this chamber. So this is the
what are they bitching about now?
Last opportunity. The honourable member of Battle River Crowfoot, will you be retracting that?
It's the truth. It's the truth.
What did he say?
I will not
I missed
apologize to the Prime Minister,
anybody.
Mr.
What?
Speaker.
Anybody out there? What did he say?
Would you mind leaving us today?
Look at this. Look at this. They're expelling a Conservative member, and they've shut the sound off again. You're watching something incredible here. I'm glad I tuned in. I'm glad, and I'm sure you're glad you tuned in too, because they finally got some passion in the House of Commons again. They're fighting for some truth. They're fighting for something real.
Disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to the authority granted by me, Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House from any participation by video conference for the remainder of this sitting day. But he did leave.
Anybody who's listening in the comment section, I missed it. What did the member say to get expelled? Did he call him a liar? I'm calling him a liar. Expel me. Lying, yes. Oh, we can't use that word.
Speaker, in Canada, over half of women with disabilities are living on less than $10,000 a year.
So this moron of a speaker who is out in Washington today, D.C. today. Yes, somebody just pointed out. Yes, a Saxon Steel pointed out in the comments section. Greg Fergus is meeting with Nancy Pelosi today, and he was at a summit yesterday where he was speaking about Klaus Schwab. He's once again, just after apologizing for the video where he's lauding the work of the Ontario Liberal Party and how they got Dalton McGuinty elected, he's got the nerve to make another partisan remark to an international audience. And somebody in that audience was really mad because they leaked that video to, and I'm going to put it in the section here if you haven't seen it. They leaked that video to Andrew Scheer, a former speaker who's really carrying the torch right now to get this idiot to resign or fired somehow. God knows why they ever elected this guy to be speaker. He's incompetent, and he's the most partisan speaker we've had in God knows how long, in recent memory for sure. I'm going to put that in here.
Workers have been killed in Netanyahu's bombardment, and there are still many people
I'm also
being
going to
held
put
hostage by Hamas.
the
Doctors Without Borders convoys in Gaza were attacked and destroyed, and aid trucks have been blocked.
So just hold on.
This is not eliminating Hamas. This is destroying an entire population. And yet the Liberals and the Conservatives refuse to call for a ceasefire. Why is the government's position so cowardly in the face of this humanitarian disaster?
All right. I have just put in the non-confidence petition link. Sign it, please. Oh, he's Melanie Jolie. Look at this. Look at this. There she goes.
Israeli civilians. As we, of course,
Here's, oh, sorry, Justin Trudeau's
that so many
good
women
friend.
and children, civilians in Gaza, have died during the context of
I'm
this
also going to
crisis.
put in
The
Andrew
cycle of
Scheer's
violence
link
will not
if you want to
ensure
find
Israel's
out what
long-term security,
Greg
and the
Fergus
price of
said
justice cannot be the suffering of
to an
all
American
Palestinian
audience. It's
people.
quite
The violence must
fascinating.
stop. Thank you.
The honourable member for Humber River Black Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we remember the 14 young women who
This
were
is what
killed
we're
during
here
the
for, by the way. This is
Polytechnic
what we're here for.
massacre.
We need
As
to
the
do
16 days of
stuff like
activism
this.
to end
Very important.
gender-based violence comes to an end,
And we're going to do
we are
increasing.
reminded that our work must continue until we achieve a Canada
Have a look
free
at that
of
link I just
gender-based
put in there
violence.
from Andrew
Can the
Scheer.
Minister
Everybody
of
who's
Women
on
and
today,
Gender Equality and
if you
Youth
haven't seen it already,
update the House on how our
I
government
sent that
is
to the
addressing
Post Millennial
the
this
prevention
morning.
of
I think
gender-based
they've got it up on
violence?
their
Thank
social
you very
media.
much,
But
Mr.
this shows you what this
Honourable
Greg
Minister.
Fergus is a massive hypocrite.
Mr. Speaker, I
A
thank the
massive
honourable member
hypocrite.
for her question. And today
Anyway,
we remember the victims of the massacre in
these are
Ecole
just
Polytechnique.
softball questions that
The
mean nothing.
brazen disregard.
But Fergus, after apologizing, does it again. Shows you he's nothing but a liberal hack, and he just loves it. He loves to expound on how big a liberal he's been. Look at the guy. If the guy wants to be speaker, he can keep his big bloody mouth shut for a while about how wonderful the Liberal Party is and how big a liberal he was and how much he worked for the Liberal Party and how great Dalton McGuinty and other provincial leaders were and how much he loves Justin Trudeau. He can keep his mouth shut about it for a while if he wants to be speaker.
Senators who voted to gut Conservative Bill C-234, a bill that would have provided carbon tax relief for Canadian farmers and for Canadian families who are just trying to put food on the table. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, will this Prime Minister end his carbon tax obsession and provide relief for Canadians so they can stop turning to food banks?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the member opposite knows, there are no senators on this side of the House. The only senators that are
Well, what? That is bogus. They don't call themselves liberals, but that's what they are.
Would like to ask
She's lying again.
Conservative senators didn't show up
This
to vote. Is it
this
perhaps
House
because
leader
they
is
don't
an
support the
abomination
leader's position
to
on
the House of
Ukraine and
Commons.
recognize that if they truly cared about
Sitting
making
there
food
with
more
Nazis.
affordable, they might actually support the Canada-Ukraine
She
trade
actively
agreement. But the
supported
questions he has to ask
having a former Waffen SS soldier go to the House of Commons to sit in the galleries. She supported it. She met with him beforehand.
Mr. Speaker, the minister
And
can say whatever
afterwards.
she wants, but when the minister is phoning his liberal appointed senators and instructing them how to gut the bill, it's pretty hard to believe them. Common sense conservatives will axe the tax, removing the carbon tax from Canadian farmers, making food cheaper for all Canadians. The Prime Minister continues to stand in the way of Canadian farmers and punish them with this carbon tax. When will the Prime Minister set aside his ideological opposition to the carbon tax and remove it for all farmers, families, and First Nations?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, but once again, that member knows full well, and although
Knows
he's
full
not sharing
well.
it with Canadians, that the only senators that sit in a political party are Conservative senators, and they didn't show up to vote yesterday. So he should really ask
She's lying.
why they didn't do that. Perhaps they have an issue with some of the positions that his leader has taken. So if he
Shameless
cares about the
liar,
high cost
shameless
of living, if he
prevaricator,
cares about
can't
food prices, then he
tell
should
the
simply
truth
change his vote
to
on the
save
Canada-Ukraine
her
trade
life.
agreement, because that is causing the most significant inflation when it comes to food prices, as is climate change. And so he should check his ideological opposition.
And you should check to see if you have a brain that functions. This is the woman who wanted to eradicate all evidence
The
of
honourable
the
member for
Waffen
Beauce.
SS Nazi.
Mr.
Just
Speaker,
make it
this
disappear.
desperate, panicking
Unfortunately, we
Prime
can't make
Minister
people
spent
like
his
that
weekend
disappear.
calling senators, begging them to kill Bill C-234.
Oh, they're not
and
liberals,
yesterday,
didn't you know?
unsurprisingly, the Senate voted for an
They're no
amendment
liberal senators.
that would empty Bill C-234 of all substance. That would keep food at an exorbitant price. At a time when Canadians are struggling, will this
Trudeau
Prime
liberals
Minister
want it
finally
to be at an
stop
exorbitant
trying
price.
to radically increase the carbon tax on farmers and families? Finally. The Honourable Minister of
Oh,
Transport.
here's the guy who
Where
can't find the
was this
barber.
member when there were forest fires and floods this summer, when people had to leave their homes? Where was he when it came time to see the impact of climate change on people, on farmers? And where was he this morning? Because this morning I was at the Liberal caucus and there were no senators, whereas he was at his caucus where there are plenty of senators. So he should tell the truth. Well, I just asked someone to leave because of the use of the word truth. It's almost the same thing here, talking about truth or lies. So I would ask the member to be careful. The honorable member for Beauce. Well, I'm connected with what's happening on the ground. My colleague may not be aware of this. There are direct impacts on farmers, including in Quebec, because the propane we use in Quebec comes from outside, so we pay for it. So, Mr. Speaker, we will not allow the economic statement from last week to pass. In fact, the government hasn't even tried to bring it to the floor for debate, and agriculture is not even in the bill. The word agriculture is not even there. With record levels at our food banks, won't this government help food prices to go down? So I repeat my question. I hope my colleague will answer it this time. When will the Prime Minister finally give up his idea of radically increasing the carbon tax? Yes. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's say things very clearly. Pricing pollution reduces pollution and puts more money into the pockets of 8 out of 10 families. Yeah. Oh, okay. Now, in terms of the number of families in Beauce receiving the child care benefit, well, it's 9 out of 10 families in that riding. They're receiving the Canada Child Benefit. And yet, the Conservative leader voted against the Canada Child Benefit. He voted against the interests of 9,000 families in Beauce. The honourable member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We now know that it was the Prime Minister who interfered with the public competition for the Afghanistan mission monument. And we know that he's the one who strategized to reverse the jury's decision and make sure that the Quebec team, the Daou team, would lose. Yesterday, the House of Commons spoke, led by the Bloc Québécois. The House condemned the government's 180 and the fact that it's not respecting its own rules. Will the Prime Minister listen to the House and reverse his decision to push aside the winning team, the Quebec team? The Honourable Minister for Veterans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let's be very clear. The Department of Veterans Affairs decided to do this because we chose to listen to veterans. More than 12,000 veterans, more than 12,000 Canadians filled out a survey and poll, and most of them were veterans. And they clearly said that the Stimson concept better represented veteran sacrifice and valor. That's why that decision was taken, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, these Liberals deliberately rejected Quebec. There was a competition in the case of the monument. Quebec won, and yet the Prime Minister decided to topple that decision. So Quebec was pushed aside. Now, in the Boeing against Bombardier file, the Liberals didn't even leave it to chance. They didn't even offer a bid for tender. So there was no chance for Quebec to win. But the result was the same in both cases. In both cases, the Liberals strategized to push aside Quebec and make it lose a federal contract. Why? The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs. Let's be very clear, Mr. Speaker. The Department of Veterans Affairs ultimately chose the Stimson's concept. We listened to veterans. We created a survey. Thousands of Canadians answered the survey. Most of them were veterans. Mr. Speaker, I just don't understand why my honourable colleague doesn't want to listen to veterans. Because once again, there's the one who made the ultimate sacrifice in the Afghanistan mission.
Honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians know the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. He spent the weekend making desperate and panic-stricken phone calls to
this is very true.
pleading with them to kill Bill C-234. And yesterday, that's exactly what they did when they voted to gut the bill and keep food prices high for struggling Canadians. When will the Prime Minister listen to Canadians, take the carbon tax off farmers, First Nations, and families that just want to heat their homes?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We don't need Conservatives to tell us how to help farmers, Mr. Speaker. Farmers are the most impacted by climate change. The last season was one of the
We just keep repeating the same bullshit. Like farmers are losing sleep over climate change.
Was a hotter season.
Just a bag of hot air.
We already know that Conservatives don't.
And they should have a
believe in climate
bag
change,
over
but it
his
seems
head
like they don't
to be
believe
talking
in
this
math
garbage.
either, Mr. Speaker. 94% of families that earn less than $50,000 a year receive more back from the price on pollution than they spend. But it's typical. It's an old story, Mr. Speaker. These Conservatives just want to steal from the poor and give to the rich, with the leader from Carleton and his merry climate change deniers.
The honourable member for Simcoe Grey.
Mr. Speaker, Liberal-appointed senators voted yesterday to keep the carbon tax pain on Canadian families and once again betray farmers by gutting Bill C-234.
Unbelievable.
With food bank usages at a record high, the Prime Minister should have the courage to explain why he instructed senators to keep food prices high for struggling Canadians.
That's right.
After 8 years, this NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister listen to Canadians and take the carbon tax off farmers, First Nations, and families that are struggling to get by?
Axe attack.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Being a farmer and meeting farmers right across the country.
You haven't been a farmer in 30 years. All you are is senile now.
Does not have a plan to deal with the environment. When you look at
He's not even the ag minister anymore. He's the environment minister 2.0.
But I told them we do have
Macaulay's a joke.
We do have a plan, and an example of that plan is with the Minister of Agriculture from Ontario. We're able to announce a $25 million program in order to make sure that farmers remain on the cutting edge. But farmers are able to produce crops that are strong in areas that are more moisture. And we, as I said, Mr.
He's a halfwit.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's clear that this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Yesterday, the Prime Minister's hand-picked senators voted to keep the carbon tax on farmers and keep food costs high.
Shameful.
In Edmonton, the
Sign the
Veterans Food
petition.
Bank is pleading for donations to help
We
our veterans.
can't survive
And that
2 more
is the
years of
legacy
Justin
this Prime
Trudeau.
Minister. Food banks are veterans begging for help. When will the Prime Minister listen to Canadians and take the carbon tax off farmers, First Nations, and families who are just desperate to heat their homes?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, as I said previously, being a farmer and talking to farmers, they cannot understand
You're not a
how
farmer.
the Conservative Party of Canada would not have a plan to deal with the environment.
You're a professional
When you deal
politician.
with situations like Fiona in Atlantic Canada, totally destroying properties, destroying
You've been
dairy
compromised
birds,
by
killing
special
animals.
interests for
In fact,
years.
that's part
You
of the
don't
cost,
defend farmers. You're an idiot.
For the price on food. Mr. Speaker, we have and will continue to support farmers. For an example, dealing
No,
with
get your
Minister
script
Thompson
here.
in Ontario, we have $25
Get your
million to make
WEF
sure
script,
farmers stay on the
Lawrence
cutting
Macaulay.
edge. We have and will continue to support farmers.
And floods, forest fires, farmers. What minister? What kind of minister am I?
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, too often people in Waterloo region and across Canada lose loved ones to overdoses caused by the increasingly toxic illegal drug supply. People who are struggling needs all level of government to work together and a comprehensive and evidence-based substance use policy. We know that stigma and fear won't solve this crisis. Can the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions inform Canadians on the harm caused by stigmatizing the
here's a
toxic drug
softball.
and overdose crisis? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
A softball
The Honourable
question.
Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
I want to thank the member for his question. Mr. Speaker, common sense
have them
without
take the MAID
science means
program.
loved ones lost.
Euthanasia is the
Raising
answer.
stigma is killing people who need our help. I was shocked to learn the Conservatives
The only
kept
help you have to
interrupting
offer
experts
is
in Health
suicide.
Committee. If the overdose crisis was truly a priority, they would listen to experts and follow the facts.
What a farce
Our
you are. What a
evidence-based plan
walking
includes
piece of
prevention,
garbage.
harm reduction, treatment, and law enforcement. We're not
All
pitting
your
one
government
foe
offers
against
is
another, Mr.
suicide,
Speaker.
you-
We're using all the tools needed to save lives. Reckless and risky games stoke fear. We need to work together and fight this crisis to save lives.
You're not saving any lives. You're taking lives. Your government's a culture of death.
Mr. Speaker, a desperate, panicked Prime Minister spent this past weekend calling senators pleading to kill C-234. Yesterday, his NDP Liberal government got their wish when the senators betrayed farmers, gutting this important bill, keeping the carbon tax. This keeps food prices high and farmers struggling. Farmers across Canada buy goods they need retail and sell what they produce wholesale. Mr. Speaker, after 8 long years, farmers know this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. If he won't help our farmers, when will he get out of the way so a Conservative government can?
The Honourable Minister
He just
of
wants his
Justice.
Christmas vacation
When I hear from
undisturbed.
everyday Canadians about affordability, when I hear from people like Lindsay in my riding, when I hear from former classmates like Stephanie, what they say to me is that the cost of food is going up.
Lindsay
but they
and
understand
Stephanie,
it's a
where'd you find
complex
those
problem.
names?
Climate change feeds into the cost of food. Things
And who
like
the hell is this
instability
guy anyway?
overseas in
He's
Europe
now the
and
Minister
an
of
illegal
Justice.
war in
Total
Ukraine
non-entity.
affect the price of food. Ergo, we just wonder about the sincerity
Ergo.
of the party opposite when they vote against instrumental measures like affordability piece of legislation or legislation that will assist Ukraine and stop that illegal war.
The Honourable Member for Medicine Hat, Cardston Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you ate today, thank a farmer. If you couldn't afford to eat today, thank these Liberals.
Right.
Our farmers spent their days working hard to ensure that Canadians have enough food. The NDP Liberal government spends their days developing new ways to tax Canadians and drive up costs. The Conservatives proposed Bill C-234 to take the carbon tax off farmers. But this piece of work, Prime Minister, has pressured his appointed senators to block this bill. After 8 years, will the Prime Minister finally get his hands out of the pockets of farmers, families, and First Nations and axe the carbon tax?
Encourage you to read. I just posted a column here from Inhuman Events. It's all about Stephen Guilbeault. I encourage you to read it and pass it on.
Misleading Canadians with respect to these issues. I certainly would invite them to read the article that the University of Calgary economist Trevor Toome put out yesterday, which basically showed that 95% of Canadians on low and moderate incomes get more money back. Rather than talking about axe the tax, they should be talking about axe the rebate and taking money out of the pockets of hard-working Canadians.
Well, I got a few more to go, folks.
Liar.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny, Lillette, Kamonuska.
The Honourable Member from Montmagny, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, farmers wanted a break on the carbon tax, but unfortunately the Senate voted for an amendment that empties Bill C-234 of all substance. Food prices will remain very high at a time when Canadians are struggling. And we certainly can't count on the costly Bloc Liberal coalition to help them. Will the Prime Minister finally abandon his plan to increase the carbon tax on farmers and families? They just can't take it anymore, Mr. Speaker.
I'm not sure I can take it anymore. Here's the homeless person up again.
I'm trying to understand the Conservatives' obsession with undermining.
How about your obsession with climate change?
I just don't understand. And they
I don't
even seem to
understand.
recognize
I don't
the existence
understand.
of climate change, and they're doing everything to avoid doing something about it.
Why don't you do something about real issues? All you want to talk about
Earlier,
is
they were
the
asking us to
weather.
speak with our senators, and they asked us to stop speaking with them. We don't even have any senators. They have plenty of senators. They should talk to their senators.
You don't have any senators.
Their senators didn't even show up to vote. They should fix their own problem.
Oh, and you should get a haircut. Oh,
The
shut
honourable
up.
member for Sudbury.
Here we go.
Mr. Speaker, today we
Softball
remember the 14 young
question.
women who were killed during the
Well, I don't want to hear about it. It's what is clear here, and I've had a few people say they don't like Andrew Scheer. Andrew Scheer was a good speaker. I didn't like a lot of Andrew's policies. I've known Andrew for about 20 years. Nice guy. I don't think he was the right guy to lead the Conservative Party, but he was a good speaker, and that doesn't mean everything he's posting should be ignored because you don't like Andrew Scheer. What he's saying about Greg Fergus is 100% right, and he is posting some very good things on his X site right now. So I encourage you to have a look at it. And he's a good guy, and I agree he was not always on the right side of the issues as the leader of the Conservative Party, but my God, he was a lot closer to it than Justin Trudeau or Aaron O'Toole, for that matter.
based violence.
The Honourable
All right.
Member For Churchill, Kiwatanukasky.
Mr. Speaker, this past summer was the worst wildfire season in Canada's history.
Oh, no,
Indigenous
no.
communities are on the front
And
lines
it was
of the
all
climate
because of
crisis
climate
and are
change.
disproportionately paying the price. Yet Liberals are investing less than a third of all emergency preparedness money in prevention, choosing to be reactive. First Nations like Bloodvein, that's been evacuated because of wildfires, does not have a fire truck to this day. The AFN is asking for $30 billion in mitigation. The Liberal spending on mitigation is a drop in the bucket. Why are the Liberals pretending this reality is acceptable for First Nations and Indigenous communities facing the climate crisis?
The Honourable Minister.
Dealing with significant wildfire seasons because of climate.
You remember this guy
And
used
it's
to be the
impacting
Minister of
the most
National
vulnerable,
Defense,
especially when it comes to
and he
our
claimed to be a
Indigenous,
hero?
communities. I've traveled every time I've gone to visit the disaster-affected areas. I do meet with the Indigenous communities. One of the things that we are looking at is making sure that we use their knowledge in terms of mitigation.
Now they've given
and
him a
making sure that
useless
we have
cabinet
appropriate
position,
response
the
plans. We are gonna
King's
get this right,
president of the
Mr. Speaker, to make
King's
sure that
Privy
the
Council for
Indigenous have the
Canada.
support to actually support
And he
us
gets up
in the
once the
wildfire
question period, and he gives you the same
And the Honourable Member
nonsensical
for
answer.
Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Sudanese Canadians have been advocating since April for this government's definition of immediate family member to include siblings, parents, and grandparents amidst escalating violence and reports of ethnic cleansing in Sudan. Now, Canadians with family in Gaza are living this same
Now, what is this guy
horror.
talking about?
While I appreciate the minister has rightfully admitted at committee that the definition probably should be expanded, nothing has yet changed. When will the minister fix this definition so that Sudanese and Palestinian Canadians can bring their family to safety?
The Honourable Minister of Immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I can't stress more to members of the House how difficult it is actually to get people out of Gaza in a war zone faced with a humanitarian disaster.
Oh,
Our priority
don't get me
remains
started
permanent
on this
residents
immigration
and
ministry.
Canadian families. We are looking at options to expand that. To
Mark
make sure
Miller's
that
another guy
people
that hasn't
connected
got
to
a clue
Canada
where he's
can be
going or
afforded a
what he
safe
wants to
haven.
do with his
But again, this is work in
portfolio.
progress, and it is extremely difficult to
Totally
get people out
over
at
his
this time.
head.
But we will continue
Totally,
to work
totally
hard to
over
do
his
so.
head.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
And that's all the time for question period we have today. We do
That's
have
all
an
the time.
introduction. I wish to draw the attention of the members in the presence of the gallery of the Honourable Nils Clark, Minister of Highways, Public Works.
That's enough for you. Anyway, that was a very spirited question period today. I haven't seen a question period like that in months. And it was nice to see MPs have a little bit of passion and fire for Canadians, to actually look like they're concerned about issues. And yeah, they're prepared to be there for a few days of their Christmas vacation. You know, and of course that just shocked Justin Trudeau. I've got to go visit the Aga Khan. Or I've got to go to the Caribbean and spend weeks at a first class resort. I need my vacation time. Justin Trudeau is very upset about this. He doesn't want the Conservatives to filibuster. He does not care about farmers. He does not care about any bill that's going to abrogate his goddamn carbon tax. And he continues to lie, as all of the front bench Liberals continue to lie about the carbon tax putting money in your pocket. You know it's a lie. You know it's a lie, just like you know the inflation rate's not 3.1% in Canada. You know it's a lie because you go to the grocery store. Justin Trudeau and Wilkinson and the rest of them, they don't shop for themselves. They have no idea what the price of the cost of living is, what the price of groceries is. Probably not even what the price of gasoline is. You ask them, they'd probably think it's still $1.20. And they have no idea what the impact of quadrupling the carbon tax is going to have on Canadians. They're still going to be saying, they're still going to be lying to you that they're putting money in your pockets. And we all know it's a lie. So thank God the Conservatives have decided to stand up for ordinary Canadians, to stand up for farmers, to stand up for agriculture, to stand against this carbon tax, because we need as many exemptions as possible so the whole damn thing can be destroyed. Thanks for watching today. I'm going to do a broadcast on a number of issues, including the Speaker, including this pushback from Polyev, and including Guilbeault. Yeah, Stephen Guilbeault, our environment and climate change minister. He's over in Dubai, whining and dining, having a great time, doing his usual crap, his self-righteousness about climate change, fight for climate change. And he's decided we need a 75% reduction in methane. That's his latest. He announces that over there. And of course, I've posted a column. If you have a chance, read it. This is the guy who appeals to the United Nations when he wants to override Canadian law. When he doesn't like what the courts are saying in Canada, he appeals to the United Nations because he's a globalist and he is a good socialist and he's a Marxist and he's a Manchurian candidate. He is a useful idiot. And that's all Guilbeault is. Thanks for watching today. I'll be back again tomorrow. We love you.